What does Corey Taylor think about what Dave Mustaine thinks about what Corey Taylor thinks about Dave Mustaine? What's up, everybody? I'm Finn McKenty. This is the Punk Rock NBA. One of the biggest things that's become just super apparent to me recently is that I think people have a very fundamental misunderstanding about exactly how the music industry works. Let me just be crystal clear about this. It is not about the music, or at least it's not just about the music. You can have the absolute best music in the world, but guess what? Without the right person fronting the band, probably not gonna get that far. So what exactly makes somebody a good front man or woman? I'm gonna break that down for you in this video, and best of all, there's a chart, because you know I love my charts and graphs. But before I get into that, really quickly, I wanted to plug two things. Number one, the Punk Rock NBA podcast is out now. Number two, if you would like to support the show on Patreon, you can do that. There's a link to that in the description. And with that out of the way, let's get into it.
Don't you have any regular friends?
Famous people are just more interesting.
So the way I see it, you can break it down along two basic dimensions. The first one along the bottom is their vocal ability in the technical sense. So this is very objective, things like range, stamina, pitch, consistency, power, all that kind of stuff. Basically just how good of a singer are they on a purely technical level. Second, and much more importantly, as I'm going to explain in this video, how much star power they have. We have that on this axis. And although this may seem subjective, I actually don't think it is. I think this is pretty objective too. Basically, what it comes down to is the ability to attract and retain an audience's attention. And this applies in every situation, whether that's on stage at a show or in the media. How much is this person able to just attract the spotlight to themselves and the rest of the band? Because that is their job. They are the front man or woman, and if they can't do that, let's be real, the band is gonna struggle. So that's the overall framework. Let's go through each one of these boxes and talk about them in a little bit more detail.
If you're gonna be a true journalist, you cannot make friends with the rock stars. Just make us look cool.
First up, down here, this is people who have low vocal ability and low star power. This is what I call the zone of pain. And I couldn't name any specific person that fits in this category because by definition, they're not memorable in any way, but you get the idea. Pretty much the singer of any random, shitty, forgettable local band would fit into this box. And there's kind of not really much else to say about this box, right? Other than if you think you're here, find a way to get out. Either become more memorable or different in some way, or become a better vocalist. Just, you gotta get out of the zone of pain.
I'll give you a tip for future auditions. Don't.
And that brings us to box number two, the group of people that I'm calling good singers. These are people who have strong vocal ability, but comparatively weak star power. Probably the ultimate example of this is Patrick Stump. Fantastic singer, but I think he would be the first to agree that at least in the beginning of the band, not a star. I think he's grown into that a little bit, but certainly at the beginning of the band, Pete was definitely the front man of the band, Patrick was the singer. Because they were smart enough to understand everything I'm saying in this video. They knew that they needed to have a strong front man. They knew Patrick wasn't that person, but Pete was. Another really good example of this, I think, is Tilian Pearson from Gavin Dance. Fantastic singer, but not super charismatic. And to be clear, this is all relative, right? Like, of course, Tilian has more star power than like some random dude in a crappy local band. Just not as much as like the elites of the genre, like Ollie Sykes.
I don't mean to be unkind, but you have one of the worst singing voices possibly in Miami.
Everyone who gets kicked off one of those like reality singing competition kind of things is a great example of this. Everybody on those shows that makes it past the initial couple rounds where they just laugh at everybody is an awesome singer, but most of them just don't have the star power, and that's why they get booted. One really interesting example of this is a woman named Bonnie McKee. If you don't know who she is, well, that is exactly my point. She is like a god-tier, ultra-secret, final boss Atma Weapons songwriter. She's written, I think, like 10 #1 songs for people like Katy Perry, Britney Spears, Cher, Adam Lambert, Christina Aguilera. Like, she is as good as it fucking gets at songwriting. She's also a really good singer, she's good looking, and yet, when it comes to releasing her solo material, it kind of just never really goes anywhere. Why? Because she doesn't have star power. Not her fault, she just doesn't have it. And I do think it's something you're largely born with, so I'm not criticizing or disrespecting anybody in this box. It just is what it is. I respect the shit out of these people because singing is really hard. I am absolutely horrible at it. But the fact of the matter is, this is not a singing contest. This is the entertainment industry, which means that it takes more than a great voice to be successful. You've got to have the star power, the ability to attract and retain an audience's attention.
Histrionic personality disorder is a pervasive pattern of excessive emotionality and attention seeking.
So that brings us to the actual topic of this video, the top half of this chart, the people who are the best frontman and women in the world. And I think you can basically break them down into two categories. The first one are the folks up here, the people who I'm calling the total package, the people who have super good voices and a ton of star power. I mean, they're great vocalists, they're super charismatic, they're generally great looking. It's not hard to understand why these people are stars, right? On the pop side of things, the obvious examples would be people like Miley Cyrus, Demi Lovato, Ariana Grande, Christina Aguilera, Bruno Mars. Or on the rock and metal side, people like Hayley Williams, Corey Taylor, and Phil Anselmo. Great vocalists, at least for their genre, and also super charismatic, huge personalities that everybody wants to pay attention to. Pretty easy to understand, I think, but there are a couple details and nuances that I want to get into. First of all, this is all relative. Like, good vocalist or big star are gonna depend a lot on what genre the person is in. It just doesn't make sense to compare apples and oranges, right? Like, objectively speaking, pop and R&B vocalists are the best in the world and the biggest stars, but it doesn't really make a lot of sense to compare pop punk bands to them, right? One other thing that I wanted to address that I think comes up a lot when you talk about some of the people in this category, some of you might be saying they're nothing special, they're just a bunch of pretty faces. Well, yes, generally speaking, the people in this box are good-looking people because all things being equal, of course, being attractive is gonna help you.
Did you ever think that maybe there's more to life than being really, really, really ridiculously good looking?
But the fact of the matter is that being good looking is not enough to make it in the entertainment business. And actually, I would say it's not even required. To prove that, look at the zillions and zillions of people that thought that they were gonna be able to move to LA and make it in the entertainment business because they were good looking, only to find out that, oh, actually, that doesn't mean shit. You actually have to be talented and charismatic too.
Models help people. They make them feel good about themselves.
They also showed them how to dress cool and wear their hair in interesting ways.
And on the other hand, there are also tons of people who made it in the entertainment industry despite being, honestly, not great looking. The obvious examples would be like Post Malone, Lizzo, Ed Sheeran, and pretty much every guy in every metal band other than Ollie Sykes and Andy Biersack. So that box was the total packages, and that brings us to the next box right up here, the people who also have big star power, but maybe comparatively weaker vocal ability. I'm calling these people big personalities because I think really that's what they are more than anything else. And I think that this is actually probably the most interesting group on this chart because it really challenges the idea that you have to be a good vocalist, because clearly you don't.
Once again, Ashley Simpson.
And again, this is all relative. Like, nobody in this box is a bad vocalist by any means. Everybody in this box is a better vocalist than like 90% of vocalists in other bands. It's just that they aren't the very best of the best. They're not as good as the people in the other box. For example, in the pop world, you have people like Britney Spears or Taylor Swift, both of which are perfectly good vocalists. It's just that they're not anywhere near as good as the best of the best, which would be maybe like Ariana Grande and Christina Aguilera. Or on the rock and metal side of things, a good example would be Gwen Stefani when she was in No Doubt. A competent vocalist, just not the best of the best, right? Or Austin Carlile. A decent screamer, just not as good as the best of the best, which would be like Mitch Lucker or Phil Bozeman. But again, the real point here is that doesn't matter. Or at least it only matters a little bit. Because again, the front person's job is not to be the best vocalist in the world, it's to control the audience's attention. And everybody in this box, the big personalities, is very, very fucking good at that part of the job. I think Tom and Mark from BLINK-182 are probably like the best examples of this. I don't think that they would have any issue with me saying that they are not the world's best vocalists on like a technical level. I think you could call them fairly bad singers even by pop punk standards. They're just not good on a technical level. But guess what? That didn't stop them from becoming the biggest pop punk band of all time because vocal ability is only one tiny part of the equation. They're hilarious, good looking, they seem like just the coolest guys. Like you just want to hang out with them and be friends with them, right? That's charisma.
And basically, I just want you to know that I'm responsible for anything good the band has to offer.
And a few other people from the rock and metal world that I would put in this category would be Dave Mustaine, Rob Zombie, Ollie Sykes, Gerard Way, and probably Matt from Avenged Sevenfold. Not the world's best vocalist, but all big stars.
Awful.
It's bizarre.
Okay, fair enough.
So that's the framework for how I'm thinking about what makes a great frontman or woman. The main thing to take away here, again, is that a frontman or woman is defined not by their vocal ability, but by their ability to attract and retain attention. So now that I've beaten that point into your brain, let's talk about a few specific examples that I think capture some interesting details that you don't see in the chart. First of all, Corey Taylor. I think he is really like the perfect example of a total package when it comes to modern metal. Incredible vocalist who can do it all, like he can sing, he can scream, everything in between, but most importantly, he is the fucking master of staying in the media spotlight. I always joke about this, like the headlines on all the rock sites or rock YouTube channels are like, what does Corey Taylor think about what Dave Mustaine thinks about what Corey Taylor thinks about Dave Mustaine? It kind of annoys me how much attention the press pays to him, but honestly, that just tells you how good he is at his job. His job is to keep Slipknot top of mind, and he is ridiculously good at it. And the real ninja move on his part is that he has this persona of being the guy that doesn't care what the media thinks or all that rock star shit, while simultaneously also benefiting from being in the spotlight all the time. And the natural comparison there to me is Fred Durst, kind of at the other end of the spectrum. He is definitely not anywhere near as good of a vocalist as Corey Taylor, but he is even better at staying in the spotlight. He's been famous as shit for like 25 years.
You were the king of MTV, and you were on there with Britney Spears, you're on there with Christina Aguilera, In Sync.
Another really interesting one to me is Hayley Williams, especially how she went from being like the singer of this up-and-coming pop-punk emo kind of band at the beginning of their career to now being like a legit mainstream celebrity. I would say Pete Wentz is really the only other person from that generation that made that transition. And I think in her case, it's kind of for the same reasons as Blink. She's just really relatable. She's not some big, crazy, out there personality like Courtney Love or whatever. She's just kind of the girl next door in the same way that BLINK-182 are the guys next door.
Hi. Can you see all my zits?
And to get specifically into the metal world, I would say another great example is Franz from Attila. In the context of deathcore, I would say he's the total package. Because first of all, make no mistake, he is a really fucking good deathcore vocalist. Like one of the very best ever. Whether you like the band or not, the fact of the matter is he has just crazy range. He does all kinds of cool shit with his voice that I don't hear anybody else do. He's no joke. But what's most interesting to me about Franz is how for the first half of the band's life, I would say he was in the good singer box. But then around 2012, when About That Life came out, he just like turned all the like ridiculous gimmicky antics up to 11 and went up into that total package box. It's pretty rare, I think, for people to move up on that star power axis, and he did it. And a few other examples that I think all kind of fall into the big personalities category. First up, great example, Andy Biersack from Black Veil Brides. No offense to him, I think he would agree, not really the world's best vocalist. He's certainly not terrible, and he's definitely gotten better, but he's not a fantastic singer. But what he is incredibly fucking good at is being a personality and an entertainer. And that's no surprise, because like I talked about in the Most Hated Bands video that I did about them, he has been grinding since he was like a literal fucking child. Doing like acting lessons and commercials, studying Kiss, like dissecting exactly how they became what they are. He's a student of the game. And obviously he was also born as a ridiculously beautiful man, and that doesn't hurt.
Moment of truth. Hey man, what were you really doing in there? Were you peeing, number 1 or number 2?
Another example of this, I think, Lil Peep, R.I.P. Objectively, he was a terrible singer. But again, so what? Who gives a shit? Because he had what mattered. His charisma was just off the motherfucking charts. One of the most charismatic personalities to come out of the scene since like, you know, Gerard Way, Pete Wentz, Hayley Williams, and all those people who became giant, massive mainstream stars. Although in his case, I don't think it's quite accurate to just say that he was a bad singer who was super charismatic, because he was more than that. He was really like a brilliant creative mind who was good at a lot of stuff, just singing wasn't one of those things. Which brings to mind one of my personal favorite artists of the past several years, Charli XCX, who I think is kind of cut from the same cloth as Lil Peep as far as that like creative visionary type, only unlike Peep, she's actually a pretty good singer. So thinking about it now, this is actually one thing that I didn't capture on the chart that maybe needs to be on there somewhere, is like the creative vision piece, because I think people like her, Lil Peep, and actually, believe it or not, Iggy Azalea are great examples of kind of that visionary creator type of artist. Kanye is another example of this, the people where music is just one part of their overall creative vision for this thing that they want to bring to life in the world.
She's an English singer, songwriter, music video director, and record executive. I sound like Simon Cowell. I love it.
Like, you can't really just talk about her music on its own. You also have to talk about like her videos, her personal style, and like her social media content, which is just absolutely fucking god tier. Like, how good is this shit? She's another one of these people who's so good at being at the same time a larger-than-life star, but also super relatable. And also, she's just fucking hilarious.
That's not true, but I like that people think I might live in Paris, because that makes me feel like I might be a bit chic. Which that wasn't.
As you can tell, I'm a huge fan, and if anybody watching this knows her or her team, she's like my dream guest for my podcast. So if you're out there, please, I'm begging you, help me get her on.
My parents used to drive me to the raves. Oh, there's that weird kid again with her parents. Shout out mum and dad, I love you.
I could keep going on and on about this forever, and I'll probably do a part 2 of this video if you guys are interested, but the one last example I wanted to bring up is Brendon Urie from Panic at the Disco.
What's up? It's Day in the Life of a Rockstar. Check it out. I'll just have a couple beers, whatever. Taking a piss, no big deal. All right, so now it's time for sleep. Psych!
Or at this point, I guess he basically is Panic at the Disco, which is kind of my point. They came out as a band back in 2005 when he was just the front man. And even then, like, it was obvious that he was super talented and charismatic, but it was a band. It wasn't just him.
Positive Hardcore Thursday. I had a really good childhood! Everything was fine!
But over the years, they had lineup changes, people quit, and it's pretty much just become like the Brendon Urie show. And guess what? He's bigger than ever. He had a #1 album last year, did a song with Taylor Swift. So to me, no disrespect to anybody who was in the band, but this is like the perfect example of what I'm talking about, of why that charismatic frontman or woman is really the most important part of the band. If you have that, along with, of course, good music, work ethic, the ability to maintain relationships in the industry, then the sky's the limit. And if you don't have that, well, I don't know what to tell you. I think you are going to hit a ceiling that's going to be very, very hard to break through.
Give me some rock star attitude. That's better. Try one with no smile.
All right, everybody, that does it for this video. Let me know what you think in the comments. Let me know what you think about this framework of the star power versus vocal ability thing. I love it when you guys challenge me in this stuff, so please try to poke holes on it. Let me know if I got anything wrong. Also, I'm thinking that I want to do some like profile kind of videos on some of the people I talked about in this video, kind of like the one I did about Ronnie Radke. So let me know, A, if you would be interested in that, and B, who you think I should do a video about. Also, I want to thank everyone who supports me on Patreon at the true cult level or above. It is because of your support that I was able to get the podcast off the ground. The reason I couldn't do it before is because I just didn't have time. But because of my supporters on Patreon, I was able to hire a producer and editor. So thank you to everybody on Patreon for your support. So if you are interested in supporting the show on Patreon, there's a link to that in the description. There's also a link to the podcast in the description. And with that, I will sign off for now, but I will see you next time.